Penn State's projected to land an elite defensive back. They're also leading for another one. They're in the mix for two others. That's great news, but at what point in time is it too many defensive backs for this Penn State recruiting class?
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is a Locked On crossover, and you are locked on to Penn State football recruiting. My name is Zach Sako, and I'm the host of Locked On Nittany Lions, credentialed media member for both Penn State football and Penn State wrestling. He is the recruiting expert here on the Locked On Podcast Network. That is Brian Smith, host of The Portal, which is this crossover episode here. And Brian's also been covering recruiting for over 25 years. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Friendly reminder, be a part of the conversation down in the comments section. Thank you to the everydayers for making us a part of your day every single day. If you are new to both of our shows, subscribe to the YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. Penn State is laying the groundwork for a historical, and I do mean that, a historical 2027 recruiting class with not one, but two, but three potential 5 stars. We're going to talk about who's next to commit to Penn State. It's probably going to be a defensive back, and that's what we're leading off with here, because defensive back recruiting for Penn State has been insane. Kudos to Anthony Poindexter and Terry Smith, but it's getting a little out of hand, because at what point in time, Brian, you can't have 8 defensive backs in this class. They already have 4 committed at this point in time, and now there's Jasiel Hart, there's Joey O'Brien, there's Khary Adams, there's Dorian Barney. They are in the lead or strongly in the mix with some outstanding prospects. At what point in time do they have to say, no, we can't take you?
Well, let's do the math. It's one player in, one player out. How many DBs do you think are going to leave after the 25 season? Ballpark figure. That's where they got to start. I mean, it's math. Is it going to be?
There's also the portal.
Well, that's the other thing. Like, you got to figure you're going to lose one out of each room. Generically, like every room probably loses a guy. So they're going to lose 5, 6 guys total, counting the portal, counting early departure to the national. They've got the one kid, forget his name, but the kid from Alabama. He'll leave after next year. So that's one. You lose one to the portal, 2 or 3 more to graduation. So I can see 5, but going beyond like 6 recruits at a spot in a year, even if they're really good, is unusual. But at the end, if you can get Khary Adams or Joey O'Brien or somebody like that, they can play other positions. Like Jasiel Hart, like I can argue they get him, he's just as good a wide receiver prospect. So that's the other thing, versatility. If you're signing kids that are just pegged into one spot, if you're an offensive guard, you're not as valuable. But if you're a DB that can play safety, corner, or maybe move to offense and play receiver or running back, then it's a different ballgame.
And that's kind of what I'm alluding to, is because is Penn State going to settle? So we'll talk about Jasiel Hart, because actually at the timing of this episode, he's getting ready to commit. And in the time that you might be watching this, we'll focus on that in the upcoming segment here. But I don't want Penn State to settle, because if you take these commitments from other defensive back prospects that are good, but then does it ruin your chances for, Brandon Arrington, we talked about him. Maybe that's a sign that Penn State's most likely not going to get him, that, okay, you had a great visit and everything like that. You were strongly in the mix, but you kind of knew, maybe Penn State knew its chances weren't the best at the end of the day. But what does that do for Joey O'Brien? What does that do for Khary Adams when you are projected to land? Most recently here, Dorian Barney, Jasiel Hart, they're in good standing with Khary Adams. Nothing's a guarantee, but at some point in time, when you have 4 defensive back commits, you're projected to land 2 more, 3 more at this point in time. When does everybody start looking around and saying, okay, there's too much competition here, I got to go somewhere else? I know Penn State runs the 4-2-5, but this is the concern that comes to mind for me, that you can't take 8 defensive back recruits. I'm glad you brought up versatility, because David Davis is like that. David Davis is an athlete that potentially could play wide receiver, but most likely he's going to be a safety or a cornerback. Joey O'Brien, whatever position he wants to play first above all else, maybe it's wide receiver at the end of the day, but if he says, I'm going to start at safety, then yeah, he's going to start at safety. He's going to get preference. Same thing with Khary Adams here. So that's why I find it interesting that the priorities that Penn State has at the top of its big board, do they get pushed aside by proxy because, okay, we want to take a commitment here and we want to take a commitment there?
It's a really tough question. I mean, you've got to ask yourself, how are we going to use these guys? What's going to be best for our program? Because like you just used O'Brien, and he's out of LaSalle College Prep down there in the Philly area. I don't know how you peg him in any one spot because his film is so good and he's so long and athletic. He's instinctual. But again, it's schematics. Penn State needs receivers more than DBs. This is not a newsflash. But if he wants to play DB, you let him play DB. If he wants to play a corner, you let him try corner. That's kind of how I look at it. But I mean, I would look at guys like that at receiver first. And again, he's so versatile. It could, whatever he starts at, doesn't mean that's the only spot he plays, and it doesn't mean he doesn't switch. Hart's that way. Khary Adams could probably play receiver. Like I'm not saying
if you asked him to, yeah, why not?
I mean, he's just very gifted. He's a top 50 kid for me. Any of those guys, you can play on either side of the ball. And Paterno, as just a reference point, he used to do that quite a bit. There'd be guys that would move back, like a tight end would come in, try him there. Okay, let's try him at defensive end or linebacker. Obviously, he was a great evaluator and a great coach. But that's the thing. If you take versatility, it'll take care of itself. You don't really worry about it on the front end when they sign on National Signing Day.
Yeah, just get them in the class and figure it out from there. It really is strange to me with, what could end up being somewhere in the neighborhood of seven. Again, they run a 4-2-5. This is what Jim Knowles, you need more. That's why you're going to see fewer linebackers and an emphasis on cornerbacks and safeties, because that's what the defense calls for. And last time I checked, Jim Knowles isn't going anywhere for the next 3 seasons. So you really got to invest in his system. Maybe I shouldn't complain or question it, because I go back to the fact that I don't question when Penn State takes a commitment. I don't, but that's more so for the standing of, well, this is an underrated prospect. For example, Jazeel Hart is most likely going to end up at Penn State. We're going to talk about him at length in the next segment. So I hope we're wrong here, but all the projections say that Hart's going to end up at Penn State. And at this point in time, he's a consensus 3-star. I'll give another example, Brian. Isaac Chukara just went to the All-22 camp in State College, Pennsylvania. He's ranked by On3 as a player outside of the top 1,000 and just won MVP, the defensive MVP. So what does that tell you about Penn State's scouting? I just find it hard to balance 7 or 8 different talented elite prospects all at once in the same position group, despite having a need for it. At some point in time, someone's going to look around and say, well, I'm not going to sign up for that.
Well, my guess is 1 or 2 of the guys they may be leading for now will eventually end up somewhere else. This is recruiting, after all, in 2025. I put up a podcast earlier today, and less than 30 minutes later, one of the kids, I said, he hasn't decided yet. He's got 3 visits coming. He committed to a school.
Nice.
Less than 30 minutes.
Nice.
So I understand what it's like. And there's going to be more of that. So some of these kids are going to take visits to other schools. And for whatever reason, they decide on that program, maybe because of what you just said, Zach. Hey, it's awfully crowded here in Happy Valley. How about I go somewhere else? And it kind of, again, it takes care of itself. But if Penn State got 6 really good DBs, they're good. They don't, you know what I mean? It takes care of itself. So they're going to win out either way. The process will take care of that.
Well, let's talk about who could potentially commit next to Penn State. Mentioned Jazeel Hart. Dorian Barney had a really good visit. Khary Adams got a projection, top 50 player in the nation. And Joey O'Brien said he had another great visit, but Oregon and Notre Dame are still right there. So who can Penn State fans expect next in the class of 2026? Well, we'll tell you after a word here from our sponsors. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and even live during the game. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and to win big. And if you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head over to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. That's right, $200 in bonus bets to use on the NBA playoffs. And if we look over at FanDuel, you can see the lines for those conference finals. The Minnesota Timberwolves are on the road against the Oklahoma City Thunder. They are 7.5-point underdogs, plus 260 on the money line. The Thunder are minus 320. The total is set at 214.5. Thunder lead after one game so far. If you like those lines, go over to FanDuel.com. And if you are new to FanDuel, place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. We have to begin with Jazeel Hart because he is the most pressing. His commitment date's actually today. So we anticipate that he will end up a Penn State Nittany Lion. I guess everyone can clip this if we're wrong, but all the projections, all the intel that I've seen is that Jazeel Hart is going to be a take and he's going to commit here to the Penn State Nittany Lions. Brian, again, another situation of you look at the recruiting rankings, the recruiting profile, consensus 3-star. Why is Penn State taking this? When there's Khary Adams out there and Joey O'Brien, why are you immediately taking Jazeel Hart? And the first thing that you said was, oh, they're getting Jazeel Hart. That's a good ball player.
Yeah, I like this film a lot. I saw him 3-4 months ago, and I'm like, this is a kid that can play in the SEC and play DB. And that's as far as an athletic profile, about as good as it's going to get. But because he's so twitchy and he has pretty good hands, maybe he ends up catching passes. Whatever it is, it's fine. And if you're that kind of guy, it wouldn't be shocking if you used him in the backfield in some capacity or like an extension of the running game with short passes too, because he is twitchy. Again, 3-yard pass can turn into a 60-yard touchdown if you know what you're doing. And Penn State's offense is going to find ways to get the ball outside a little bit more, I think, moving forward. And they're looking for guys like this that'll make the first defender miss. That's been something they haven't had enough of lately. That's like the next piece of the evolution, really the final, like everything else Penn State pretty much has. If you get a few more of those guys, it takes so much stress off of your running game. So the outside play is important for them, whether it's corner. Sounds like they're probably going to lose some DBs. And he could probably play safety too, give him some time to grow. But I just like the player. I liked both sides. And a buddy of mine who evaluates too, we weren't sure which side we would really want him on. So that's a good problem to have.
Top 10 player in the state of Virginia. On 3 has him listed as a 4-star. Here's how you know to put the recruiting rankings aside in some of these discussions. If Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, Tennessee, and Virginia Tech are all vying for the same player, that means he might be better than that 3-star ranking here. When I watch the film for Hart, he's fluid. It looks very natural for him at that cornerback position. I think that's why Penn State is like, okay, 3-star ranking aside though. And, we still want to work our way up with a Khary Adams, with a Joey O'Brien for defensive back, right? In general, I know one's a safety and one's a cornerback as well, but why you take a chance now on Jazeel Hart and don't tell him to wait or delay his commitment with the risk that, okay, he ends up at Notre Dame. Okay, he ends up at Michigan. You take this one now because you do see the potential here. Just the closing speed, fluid with his footwork, instinctive. Those are all the traits that you want in a surefire cornerback. And honestly, the same kind of characteristics that can apply to Dorian Barney. Penn State left that weekend of official visits. There's no official visits this weekend, interestingly enough. There's a gap, and then there's the next official visit weekend. But Dorian Barney, actually from Erie, Pennsylvania, transferred down to Carrollton, Georgia, played alongside Juju Lewis. He might start at Colorado. So that's just a little bit of connection there for college football fans. And now Barney logs a prediction from On3 that he's going to end up at Penn State. So you see my point as, another defensive back. And when could this commitment happen? Again, and I do not try to use the word elite lightly here, but when you watch the film, okay, well, he's a 3-star, he's a low-end 4-star. Just watch the film, watch the tape, and you can see why Penn State is pushing for a commitment from Hart and Barney alike.
Yeah, any year that you can get kids like this, you take them. Barney's another kid that I'm familiar with. He lives in Georgia. I don't live that far from him. Look, Carrollton High School puts out skill players like hardly any other program in the country. That kids go Florida State, Georgia, USC, all over the place. It's a really good program. So he's going to come in a little more polished than some other schools, and he's played against big-time high school competition in Carrollton. So, Yeah, that's an easy one for me. And for all the reasons you mentioned, talk about physical attributes. But the other part, like if you played legit competition in high school, that'll make the transition to the P4 level that much easier.
Now, Barney, the only thing that I think is holding him back from a commitment right now, because the intel says that he's all in on Penn State, but he was also all in on Texas A&M at one point in time. He has another official visit set up with the Aggies. I really think that's what the battle is. It's Penn State and Texas A&M. If the visit doesn't hit home for him with Texas A&M, I think he's a Penn State Nittany Lion.
That visit is one of those things you just cross your fingers. If you're James Franklin and the staff, you never know. This is recruiting again in 2025. But if you feel that good and somebody's logged a prediction, my guess is he's told him he's probably coming and somebody's found out. That those don't just happen by accident. So I told you before last weekend, we talked about Penn State. I said, don't be surprised. They
called it.
Yeah, I know. I said, don't be surprised. I bet they got a shot at this kid. I was right, but doesn't mean you'll sign him and he could commit a couple of different times. This is recruiting 2025. And A&M, for whatever reason, they must have somebody on their staff from that area. They're doing very well in Georgia. It's very unique. I don't know what's going on with that. At one point, they had more Georgia commitments than they did kids from Texas. I don't know if that'll continue. That's very odd. But A&M's done a good job. So it's an SEC program, so it's viable. This is why recruiting is also very fascinating.
Khary Adams got a projection, but I imagine that his recruitment, similar to Joey O'Brien, is just going to take its full course. He's going to go through the official visits because he can. He can. There are prospects that they got to make a decision right now, or the room is going to fill up. This isn't just about defensive back. This is about everywhere that you got to make a decision sometimes. Or if you're Brandon Arrington as a 5-star, right? This is so self-explanatory. It's not really rocket science here, but sometimes you have to get ahead and commit to a class early so you don't lose your spot. But when it comes to as I say that, Khary Adams is probably going to take his due diligence, take his visits, even though 24/7 puts in a projection that says that, hey, expect Penn State to land him.
If he doesn't take any more trips, I could buy that. But the 5-star and borderline 5-star kids usually don't take 1 or 2 trips. They usually take 3 to 5. So then it becomes anybody's ball game. I always thought Penn State and Oregon for him. I know Notre Dame's involved. I can't remember the other schools, but everybody's offered Khary. And I wouldn't want to touch that one with the 10-foot pole. But his skill, he's my number 2 corner in the country. So he's really, really good. And I don't think anybody's going to question his ability to play early. And he's a Baltimore area kid. That's an area that Penn State should always be viable for when they're trying to do their best. And they've got a great recruiting staff, no question. So this doesn't surprise me that he got a prediction. It's just the timing of it. Really early for a kid like that, because I bet he takes 3 or 4 visits.
So that's what to expect in the near future. Jazeel Hart, you should probably get good news here if you're a Penn State fan with what we're talking about. So you get a scouting report on Hart, who should be the latest expected Nittany Lion. Dorian Barney not too far behind. Khary Adams, Joey O'Brien probably still going to go through the official visit cycle because they have the luxury to. But we got to look out further into the future. Okay, so 2026, we're talking about it now in the present, but 2027. I'm not using the word historic lightly here. Penn State is already on track to have not 1, not 2, but potentially 3 5-star commitments. They're already committed to the class of 2027. We'll tell you more about them coming up next here on this Locked On Crossover. 2027 is off to a fantastic start. Fantastic, phenomenal doesn't even begin to describe it for Penn State at this point in time with the class of 2027. This is par for the course, though, with Penn State, is that they usually are out in front of the following recruiting cycle, where they will have about 2-3 names that really stand out and put them right there at the top, top 3. I mean, Penn State started off with the top recruiting class in cycles over the past 5 years. But ultimately everything settles in and they might get a top 10 group or they get a top 15, but usually they're out and running in the top 5. but they very well might stay there when the dust finally settles. They very well might stay there because they have a top 10 player committed, a top 20 player committed, and the number 32 overall player committed based on On3's latest rankings. Keemon Spell, superstar running back. He might be RB1 in this class. Khalil Taylor, wide receiver out of the Pittsburgh area, might be wide receiver 1 when all said and done. And I still think that Leighton Von Brandt, I don't think 32 nationally does him justice. I think this could potentially, a few more spots, but he could be solidly a top 25, top 20 player overall. Things could change, but if you're Penn State, you got to like where things stand with 2027. And this is very reminiscent of what 2022 was for Penn State when they had Drew Aller, Nicholas Singleton, Denai Dennis Sutton as multiple 5-star commits. So this is what they're doing once again, where you have the faces of your class and everything will take care of itself. It's a domino effect, but this isn't just a few underrated prospects here and there. These are guys that are already getting national recognition, and they're more or less all top 30 players.
And all of them will probably end up top 100 by all the services, if not top 50. When you see balance like that, it's also another barometer to look at, and they're all going to be ranked very high. And good for Penn State. They're keeping kids close to home, at home, and they're getting guys early so they can really focus on the players they want to recruit nationally. It's a win-win for James Franklin and his staff. And to your point, it shows you that they understand the recruiting process is about getting out there early. The schools that don't are the schools that end up searching close to signing day, and that generally doesn't go very well. So James Franklin, you can say whatever you want about his staff, but don't say they aren't really aggressive recruiters and they're not ahead of the game. I mean, you can say whatever you want, but that's one there is just out there. There's like, they are awesome at it. They have been for years. I've been saying it for a long time. They might have the best overall organization as a recruiting staff in the country. This is just more proof.
Keemon Spell continues this, should be louder. It's a quiet trend nationally. I could make the case that Penn State's been running back you for the past 5, maybe even 10 years, because Saquon Barkley and then Miles Sanders was a really good college running back. And then if it wasn't for a medical condition with Journey Brown, he would have had the baton passed to him. Then they took a little bit of a lull, and then Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen simultaneously, both of them together are top 5 running backs in the nation right now. And if they were the workhorse, the bell cow type of running backs, they would annihilate every statistic across the board here. So Keemon Spell is just another potential future iteration of that, being a top 10 player and the number 1 overall running back. He's from the state of Pennsylvania, so the best in PA, stay in PA. The addition here that is probably refreshing for a lot of Penn State fans is the potential in a 5-star receiver with Khalil Taylor. So Keemon Spell, we expect that. We're Penn State has a case to be RBU, but it's with all the animosity that has, or all of the issues that have surrounded wide receiver play at Penn State for the past few seasons. And then, early in the 2027 cycle, I know it's so far into the future, but it will be here tomorrow. I promise you that Penn State has a potential 5-star wide receiver as one of the faces and one of the people to do that recruiting and that heavy lifting for you to build this class.
That's important. When you have a chance for a layup, like a kid that just wants to go to your school because he's local, man, you got to hit on that, especially if he's a truly big-time talent. And again, they're doing it early, making the groundwork come to fruition for him. I don't know if they expected him so early, but that's great for Penn State. And that'll also help you attract other players, because great players want to play with other great players. So, I mean, if you can get the 5-star there, you've obviously conquered about every other position. Maybe they get maybe one more D tackle. That would be the icing on the cake right there. That's the spot that's hardest for everybody. So Penn State's not alone there, but that's been their biggest problem is wide receiver. Getting the local kid was very important.
I'll tell you what it's nice to see this trifecta of stars coming together. And that's not to dismiss Leighton Von Brandt, but offensive line, not a lot of people are going to, but offensive line wins you games. Battle in the trenches. What you have up front wins you games. So it's not to dismiss him, but everyone cares about quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers. So Von Brandt is certainly, I still think, again, To say he's underrated at 32 overall is something. It's just the peak athleticism for him as an offensive lineman. He moves like a tight end, but he's an offensive lineman. What I'm getting at here is, to complete the trifecta, Penn State is in the running for a Peter Bork. And if you could get him committed sooner rather than later, he's a potential. Now, he is a little bit lower down the top 100, but he's still there. He's still within the top 100. Bork is a five-star potential quarterback out of the state of Massachusetts. So there you have a top-tier quarterback, top-tier running back, top-tier wide receiver. You get your anchor on the offensive line. James Franklin and the recruiting staff might as well kick up their feet, because these four will be able to do so much of the recruiting on their own if it were to come to fruition. I'm not guaranteeing that Peter Bork is going to commit, but that is a name to watch. That somebody, I've seen intel that says that, hey, Penn State might be closer to a commitment rather than further away from one.
Yeah, he's a kid he's come across my desk a few times as well. Other schools, prominent programs are looking at him. I'm sure Syracuse is, based on where he's at in Boston College, among others.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to have offers around the nation. At either Michigan or Notre Dame, if not both, are looking at him. So, yeah, that's anytime you can get the kids to the Northeast, and it's not as plentiful, but you got to capitalize. And Penn State right now is doing that. And again, this has been their area that they needed to kind of shore up. After Drew, there wasn't a lot of assurity, hey, this is going to happen, but they got two quarterbacks committed in this class. If you can start off and get another one in the next class, then you've completely taken away any concerns for the future.
Also want to throw another name out there just because he deserves the due respect, and that's Maxwell Hiller in the state of Pennsylvania, an interior offensive lineman that is not too far off. He's not too far off. He's just outside of the top 50 of overall players in the nation. So again, if Penn State can continue to check these boxes, I do mean that when I say 2027 could potentially go for it, be in the running to be the best recruiting class ever in James Franklin's tenure. And that's saying something, of a decade plus at the helm of Franklin.
Yeah, that would be good for them. They just needed a few more frontline guys, I think, to consistently compete with Ohio State, Oregon, those kinds of programs. And it's really just one or two kids, special players that make special plays in the biggest of moments. Sounds like they're kind of headed that direction for the class of 27.
And that's going to do it for this Locked On crossover episode featuring Locked On Nittany Lions and the Portal. My name is Zach Seiko. He is Brian Smith. Thank you again to the everydayers out there for making us a part of your routine each and every day. If you are new to our shows, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and wherever you get your podcasts, become an everydayer. Friendly reminder, be active in the comments section. Let us know your thoughts down below. Brian, thanks so much for the time. Glad we could link up again for another crossover, and we'll continue to do these because now, again, we're in the middle. We have a break, but we are in the middle of official visit season, so can't wait to talk to you again in the not too distant future.
Absolutely. Appreciate it.